We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not despairing, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, always carrying about in the body the dying of Jesus, that the life of Jesus also may be manifested in our body. For we who live, Christians, are constantly being delivered over to death for Jesus' sake, that the life of Jesus also may be manifested in our mortal flesh. So death works in us, but life in you. This is a place in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, and you can keep there and forward because we're going to come back to that. 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 8. We do not want you to be unaware, brethren, of our affliction which came to us in Asia, that we were burdened excessively beyond our strength, so that we despaired even of life. Indeed, we had the sentence of death within ourselves, in order that we should not trust in ourselves, but in God who raises the dead. And that's a spiritual truth, reality, that's true about every single believer, that there is a sentence of death within yourself, that you should not trust in yourself, but in God who raises the dead. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, 7 to 11 is all about the cross being worked out in our experience. We know that the old self, the independent, fallen self, who was under condemnation and under the reign of sin, it was a slave to sin, that old self was crucified. But we also know that this reality, this truth is being worked out into our experience. And therefore there's the renewing of our minds. Transformation comes from that. And in this flesh, there's still this law of sin that Romans 6 and 7 talks about. It's no longer my master. I'm no longer its slave, but I can still be tempted. The temptation can come from within. Now greater is he who's in me. And the law of the Spirit of life that's in Christ Jesus is greater than the law of the spirit of death. So the Christ in me is more powerful, and it's not even close to that law of sin in my members, but it's there. So I can walk after the flesh. I don't have to. I'm in Christ, but I can live as if I were the old man, the old self. But again, I don't have to. Ephesians chapter 4, when Paul appeals to them towards the end of that chapter, to Ephesians, he's telling them, he said, stop living as if you were lost people. Because we can. And so it's so imperative that we understand who we are, what he's accomplished on the cross, and how that's being worked out in our life, taking up our cross daily and following him. Taking up the cross that you were crucified on daily, and its truth being worked out in your experience day by day. Okay? So when he talks about light shining out of darkness, that's what light does. And so the one who says that light shines out of darkness is shown into our hearts, revealing to us the glory of God in the face of Christ. And so, in verse 7, and what he says is like one of my favorite scriptures in all of the Bible. It's a powerful statement, but it had to say that it's said, not in isolation to what verses 8 and 9 say. When verse 8 and 9 says, in this fallen world, Jesus said, in this world you have tribulation. When verse 8 and 9 says, we're afflicted in every way, but not crushed. We're perplexed, but not despairing. Persecuted, but not forsaken. Struck down, but not destroyed. Again, always carrying about in our bodies the dying of Jesus. Always this principle of the sentence of death to our own self-effort, to our own, that's a good word, self-effort. Because God's transforming our minds and teaching us to live as the new creation in absolute utter dependence on him, which is the life of faith. Faith itself I go to someone to fix my car, because God knows if I try to fix my car, it'll never run again as long as I live. So if I go to someone that I trust in faith, I'm depending on them, but it's not just dependence, it's confidence. I'm depending on you, and I have confidence in who you are to do what I can't do for myself. That's the very nature of what faith is all about. So anything that reduces you and me to faith in our daily walk is the cross being worked out in our lives. That's really important for you to hear. Anything that reduces you to depend on him, anything that reduces you to faith, is the cross being worked out in our experience. So that which he accomplished for you is now being worked out in your daily experience. And so he makes this statement, and this verse 7 is one of the best verses in the Bible that uses figures or I guess metaphor that to talk about our identity. The other one that's so great is branches and vine. That he's the vine, he's the whole grapevine, he's the vine. We're the branches. We're not separate. We're part of the vine called branch, through whom the vine produces fruit. We bear fruit, we don't produce it. Okay? So if you're trying to be a better husband or a better wife or a better witness, stop it. Trying to do that won't accomplish anything. Only Christ is the promise keeper. Faithful is he who calls you. Has he called you to be a husband or a wife? Has he called you to be a witness or to be a neighbor or an employee or employer? Yes. Faithful is he who calls you, who also will do it. And so in verse 7, he says, but we have this treasure, the life of Christ and the glory of God that he brings. For we have this treasure in earthen vessels, so that the surpassing greatness of the power, and the word power is the word dunamis, that's not new to you, but the word dunamis in the normal Greek language was just meant ability. And the New Testament is used to represent God's ability, his supernatural ability. For we have this treasure in earthen vessels, so that the surpassing greatness of the ability will be of God and not ourselves. For we are afflicted in every way. We are perplexed. There are times when we are persecuted. And the word persecute simply means to pursue, to attack. This isn't just about, as a Christian, you get persecuted. It means there are people in your life, people around your life who have assaulted you, attacked you verbally, in other ways, rejected you. All of us have experienced that. I guess if you haven't, meet with me afterwards because I want to introduce myself to you. All of us have known what it is to be attacked, at least verbally and relationally, and to be rejected. So Paul is saying here, in this fallen world, we are going to experience affliction. And he didn't say affliction, we're going to be afflicted in every way. And the word affliction is a word, the Greek word, that means you're pressed in on all sides. So in this world, there are going to be stresses in every way that are pressing against you. In this world, there are going to be times when you're perplexed, you're at a loss, you don't know what to do. 2 Chronicles 20, verse 12, Jehoshaphat, facing 3 opposing armies, said, Lord, I'm powerless against this great multitude, and we don't know what to do. But our eyes are on you. And again, as believers, as humans, with fallen people around us, we've all experienced persecution, rejection, assault in some way. And the word struck down means to be cast to the ground. Those devastating things that happen sometimes in a fallen world. And all of you have experienced them. If you've lived long enough, you've lost someone that you're close to, that you care about. Because it's just part of the deal. And other things. It could be losing everything you have or going bankrupt or whatever, but the word struck down is sort of catastrophic things. Those things happen, again, in this fallen world. Now, when he says, so therefore, in light of all that we do get afflicted in every way. We do have those things in our life that are perplexing. We're at a loss. We don't know where to go, what to do, what to think, what to say, how to fix it. There are times when we are rejected, not respected, and there are times when we go through very difficult, hard things. And so therefore, the verse 7, we have this treasure in earthen vessels, so that the surpassing greatness of the ability to walk through this fallen world is of God and not ourselves. The fact that we're referred to as vessels is really important. And because the word earthen speaks of a clay vessel, simple clay vessel. And often in the days of Christ, in ancient days, wealthy kings or magi, they would put gold and precious jewels in earthen vessels so that thieves would never think to look there. They would steal these important vessels, and they would have something in them, but not the most important things. Now, the problem with the earthen vessel, why nobody would want to steal it, because on its own, it doesn't have much worth. And it's very fragile, easily cracked, easily broken. But the thing about a vessel is this container, and it's created to contain something. For us as Christians, we understand that humans were created to contain him. And only in containing him do we find our true identity. And apart from him, we can do nothing. Adam and Eve were formed out of dust. It's wet dust that makes clay pots. We were created to be utterly and totally dependent on him. Again, that's why he said, apart from him, you can do nothing. You go, yeah, but I've done a lot of things apart from him. Well, it amounted to nothing. And one of the things I've discovered over the years, that understanding that, my battery's about to go dead, so it doesn't matter. Good thing we'll just do this. Battery die on me. We'll just turn this thing off. It's okay. I've taught it for a few times. That we were created in such a way that we're utterly and totally dependent on him. You can't be the godly wife apart from depending on him. You can't be the godly husband. You can't be the witness. You can't be the good employee, whatever, good neighbor. You can't be those things apart from him. That's the way you were created. And one of the first steps, as I was saying before my iPad so rudely interrupted me, is that getting set free and walking in real abundant life begins with you understanding that in yourself, apart from him, you're a clay pot that's fragile and frail and easily broken. That you can't do this thing. You couldn't do life, much less the Christian life, because the Christian life is much harder if you try to do it on your own than the lost life. Because being lost, you just give in to all the stuff. But if you're trying to live the Christian life, you're trying to be like Jesus, it's even going to expose even more your weakness. But discovering your weakness is not a curse. It's a great blessing. Paul said, I will therefore boast about my weakness. For when I'm weak, then I'm strong. Because in my weakness, his strength is made perfect. So if you have a clay pot and it's without a treasure in it, it's just a clay pot, empty. And everything about its life, purpose, and worth and identity is emptiness. But we were created as a vessel to contain his life. So once you put a treasure in that clay pot, it totally changes the identity of that pot and its worth and value. One of the great examples in the New Testament is in Luke, when Jesus, the Son of God, was birthed in a stable, and he lay in a manger, wrapped in rags. And a manger is a feeding trough, so animals, they didn't have Purell, they couldn't clean it. It was all kind of bacteria and stuff. I'm sure they covered it with stuff, but still, who would put their baby? Nobody in their right mind would put their baby in a situation like that. They had no choice. And why? What was the purpose of all that? Because you see, that manger never is thought of. Nobody ever thinks of that manger as this empty, worthless thing. Whenever we think of that manger in Bethlehem, we think of this vessel that contained the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Because his presence changes its identity. It's his presence that changes your identity. You can't see yourself. You can't think of yourself. You can't tolerate a consciousness of yourself apart from your consciousness that this treasure that is Christ is now filled you. And it's him in you that identifies you. The enemy all the time will come along and tell you stuff, especially after failure. You know, of your value and you're not having much worth and what a failure you are. And then what you are is a vessel that contains the most precious treasure. The glory of God in the person of Christ lives inside of you. And again, we have this treasure in earthen vessels so that when afflicted in every way, when perplexed, when persecuted and rejected, when struck down, so that in all those situations, the surpassing greatness of the ability to walk through those things victoriously is of God and not from you. That's why statements like, whatever goes on around you, no matter how anybody acts or behaves, whatever circumstance is going on, it doesn't change the truth about who he is in you. And walking in faith is learning how to abide in him, to remain in that place of resting in him, and therefore seeing how he sees this and what he thinks about that. And then depending on that, trusting in that and who he is. So look at those verses again. And again, let me just emphasize what the Holy Spirit does. He doesn't say we have this treasure in earthen vessels so that you can squeak by. At the end of the day, go, I'm falling into bed because I made it another day. That's not Christianity. And if that's your experience, then the enemy's been robbing you of the truth about who you are in him because he's in you. So he says, we have this treasure in earthen vessels. So the fact is, don't feel guilty that you have weakness. Don't feel guilty that sometimes you feel afflicted. You feel like you feel all the stuff coming on. Don't feel guilty that sometimes you feel, I'm at a loss, I don't know what to do. Don't feel guilty at times that you feel the pain of being persecuted, of being pursued, of being rejected. Don't feel guilty that you feel struck down like I've just been hit, I've been slammed to the ground in this situation. Now, living in that is not God's heart for you. Surrendering to that is not God's heart for you. All those things represent temptation. And don't feel guilty that you're tempted to feel those things or to give into those things. Jesus was tempted too in all those ways. And so he says here, we have this treasure in earthen vessels so that the surpassing greatness of the power. It's not that we get to win by an inch. We get to win by a mile. Because Jesus, his ability is surpassingly greater than those things. It's not that, again, we're just trying to survive another day. I mean, it's one thing to be tired on the outside. It's another thing to be tired on the inside because of stuff going on in this fallen world. That's not what the Lord wants. Now, it's one thing to be tempted to be insecure. It's another thing to live in insecurity. So the victory that he promises us isn't a victory free from battle. It's an overcoming, surpassing victory in the midst of battle. And when Israel stepped into the promised land, which is a type of the Spirit-filled living, they engaged in battle every day. But the Lord promised them, the battle is not yours, but mine. And every piece of ground that you go step in, I've already given it to you, but you got to step. You got to walk it out. And so when he says, so the surpassing greatness of the power may be of God and not yourself, we are afflicted in every way. That's the vessel. But not crushed. That's the treasure. See, it's one thing for pressures to come. It's another thing to get stressed out. Because if you're trying to deal with it on your own, when the pressures come, you get stressed out. And you get frustrated, impatient, and all those kind of things. Right? But the treasure within, who has surpassing greater power than that thing, though the tin cans being pressed, he, Jesus, doesn't get crushed. And so the cross is working in me. The Lord uses this fallen world to accomplish his purposes. There'll come a day when I'll see him face to face and I won't get afflicted in anything or persecuted or any of that stuff. But we're in this fallen world. And so God doesn't waste anything in his genius. And so the cross is working in me that when affliction comes, whatever that might be, oh, it's a really busy day, there's got all these phone calls are coming in, there's this going on, I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off kind of stuff. Jesus doesn't run around with his chicken like a chicken with his head cut off. And Jesus never stresses out. I mean, we've said these kind of things so many times, but he doesn't get frustrated. He doesn't get impatient. You may feel those things, but what you do with those things will determine the quality of life that you live and the quality of life that people around you get to experience. Those things may be coming, but we're supposed to lean into, rest in the one whose ability far surpasses that thing. Okay? Again, he says that we're perplexed. And I've been in situations, now that I've become the thing that I've become, and the place I'm in, I'm having to learn to navigate new things. And there are times that things happen, and because the more you get promoted in leadership, the more you have to deal with leaders. You know what I'm saying? So it's much easier to deal with good old sinners than sometimes to deal with leaders. And so now you have, as you do that, I'm learning that there are just things, Lord, I'm at a loss here. And then Jesus is like going, so? I'm not. You may be perplexed, but I'm not despairing. This doesn't threaten me, doesn't make me feel, oh my gosh, I just can't take this anymore. This is so bad, it's so awful. Jesus doesn't do that. That's the treasure. And in that moment, I can sink into him and thank him. Lord, what matters here is that you're not at a loss. I may be at a loss, but you know what you're doing. This is in a situation that's beyond you. It feels like it's beyond me. Didn't Paul say that? That the situation in 2 Corinthians 1, beyond their strength, even to the point where they thought they were dying. He said, but it's the sentence of death within me. It's the cross at work, teaching me not to trust in myself, but in him who raises the dead. So if he raised the dead, whatever you're facing, stresses or perplexity, he's bigger than. So we learn to lean into the treasure. And when we do, the glory of God shines out of that darkness. Do you see? Light shines out of darkness, not just in the darkness, but it shines out of darkness. So being afflicted in every way, stresses, feels like darkness. And as we lean into him, light shines out of that darkness. When we feel perplexed, when we're at a loss, but we lean into him, rest in him, and he's not despairing, he's not threatened by it all, light shines out of darkness. And we're learning to live by faith. When we're persecuted or rejected, the word, even though we're rejected, we're not forsaken, because the one whose opinion about me matters the most never turns away from me. That's what the word forsake means. It says he'll never leave you or forsake you. And so he won't forsake me in that situation. And what he does, light shines out of darkness. Because I'm leaning into him, I'm no longer thinking about how this is affecting me. Right? But Paul said, the love of Christ controls me, having concluded this, that if one died for all, therefore all died. And those who live no longer live for themselves, but now for him and through him, who died and rose again on our behalf. And so the one who doesn't forsake me, standing there with me in that situation, understanding the pain, but setting me free from giving into the hurt and loving them more. And light shines out of darkness. So if you could see all these things in your life as opportunity to experience the surpassing greatness of his ability. I mean, how many times have you been in situations and you need wisdom? Well, Jesus said, if you feel perplexed, he's not despairing. He knows exactly what he wants to do. Just stop and remember who he is in you, who he is to you, your life. And then the last one, he said, struck down, but not destroyed. Again, even when you're struck down, when something happens that's so difficult and so painful, and it feels like it's going to destroy us, that's not true about the treasure. That's the vessel. The treasure, though we feel struck down to the ground, is not destroyed. Jesus, by his surpassing greatness, his ability, we can walk through this. Let me show you. This is a really cool verse. If I can find it. Well, maybe I can't find it. Oh, this is verse 4 of chapter 7 of 2 Corinthians. Great is my confidence in you. Great is my boast in your behalf. I am filled with comfort. I am overflowing with joy in all our affliction. What? That's the treasure within. When I get struck down more than ever, I need the joy of the Lord. Not joy in the Lord, but the joy of the Lord to be my strength. Overflowing with joy in all our affliction. Pretty amazing. And then again, verse 10 and 11 and 12. always caring about, this is just a process, a principle of Christianity, of discipleship that's always happening. The cross is at work, always caring about in the body the dying of Jesus, the cross. Why? So that the life of Jesus may be manifested in your body. God doesn't waste the tribulation in this fallen world. He uses it to teach us to live from the treasure and the surpassing greatness of his power. And as we do, we're being transformed, light shining out of darkness. And we grow in the midst of experiencing abundant life, no matter what's going on around us. One of the things that I was sharing with our House of Bishops was, it was the House of Bishops, as a matter of fact, was awesome, by the way. And I was just telling them, I said, look, I know sometimes I may come across like Pollyanna. Like Bishop talks about joy all the time, yada, 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 yada all the time. I said, like, Bishop, you just don't know how much pain can be out there. And I said to them, don't talk to me about pain. I know about pain. I'm not sharing a word with you from someone who's never experienced loss or pain. And that's just true about Paul. Livia was an amazing counselor, by the way. But if you felt sorry for yourself, she was not the person that you should go to for counseling. She didn't tolerate that very well. She, having had polio since she was 6 months old, if you come to her and feel sorry for yourself because life is tough, it would go well, but it might not be very fun when she got through talking to you. Always caring about the body, the dying of Jesus, that the life of Jesus may be manifest in our body. For we who live are constantly being delivered over. Huh? Who's delivering me over? That's in a passive voice. God's in control. He doesn't create all those things, but in the process of those things, he delivers me over to this transformation process, to the treasure. We who live are constantly being delivered over to death for Jesus' sake, that Christ might be manifest in you, that the life of Jesus also be manifest in our mortal flesh. This supernatural living. And then he makes a statement. So death works in us, but the result is life works in you. What's he saying? This is Paul. Remember Philippians. And he said, the Philippians sent a group to him because he was their spiritual father. And they sent Epaphroditus leading the group to go make sure he was okay, imprisoned in Rome. And Paul sends this letter back with Epaphroditus some months later to them to say, look, this thing has turned out for the furtherance of the gospel. He said, in this thing I rejoice. And this letter that Paul writes from that circumstance where he's facing death, because Nero, the decision is up to Nero whether to have him killed or not. And he's under house arrest. He can't go anywhere. He owns nothing. He has no freedom. Yet there's no self-pity. There's no frustration. There's no impatience. And so this letter of Philippians is the letter that's referred to by most people as Paul's joy letter. Because he's saying, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. Do all things without murmuring or complaining. That's supernatural. Only the treasurer can do that in us. And Paul is saying that my circumstance has turned out, light has shined out of darkness. And so though this death, this sentence of death is working the cross in us so that we learn to live by faith and to draw from him, the result being supernatural living, Christ being manifested through our mortal flesh. In all these situations, he said the result is the death may be working in us that is causing life to happen to you. I'm shining. And you're encountering life and life more abundant because instead of complaining, instead of living in defeat, Jesus doesn't live in defeat. He said, it's causing you to experience life because you're seeing real deal Christianity worked out in real deal blood and guts life. And the surpassing greatness of his power, the life of Christ manifested through my humanity, has resulted in you going, oh my gosh, this is a life, this life more abundant in the midst of a fallen world.